Hey guys, this is Gatsby with Tape, and today you join me for episode 5 of Road to Exploration, that's its name, and we start on the runway with a rover I built. It's a jet-powered rover, and basically this is just science mining around the space center. It's all sped up because, you know, it's just driving a rover around. But yeah, as I discovered at some point, you can get science for every building in the KSC, which is nice. Because that provides quite a lot of extra science, which is good, because my science returns are turned down to about 60% because it's on hard mode. So yeah, anyway, so I'm just grabbing pretty much as much science as I can. Because, if you remember last episode, I started the Thunder program, which was the name of the probes I was using to go to the moon, but they can't stay there, well, they can't stay there because they all return science, because I don't have any communications and I have no solar panels, so they basically end up dead on arrival. Or as the first one happened, dead in the ocean because I didn't have a fairing. But yes, I achieved fairings last episode and was able to go to the moon. But hopefully today I'll be able to achieve solar panels and communications so I can stay at the moon. Anyway, so I got a weirdly high amount of science for that, but always remember to get the science from everywhere you can get it. But yeah, that went pretty well. Anyway, so I've got a couple of missions right now. Firstly is saving that Kerbal from orbit, which is a good way to get extra Kerbals, because Kerbals are expensive, but if you save them, they love you. So this is Kerbal 1, my, well, kind of extra human space program, well, Kerbal space program, because, okay, I just said the name of the game, but anyway, you know what I mean. But yeah, Bluestone is just for taking single Kerbals to orbit to do various scientific goals, and then this one is for rescuing Kerbals. I've used an inline cockpit, not because I've researched it or thought it was the best way of doing this, but because I'm also getting paid to haul that to orbit, so I thought, might as well, and it makes the spacecraft look relatively not terrible, which is always good. So, we're pretty much just going to maneuver in. I don't have any patched conics yet, still. Because I haven't upgraded the thingamabob, the tracking station. That's what it was. I was calling it ground station last time. But luckily, I am such a glorious maneuvering king that I can get close enough. It's actually relatively easy to do this sort of stuff when you know what you're doing. But when you first play Kerbal Space Program, you're like, how do you rendezvous in orbit? And that's not just players of Kerbal Space Program. That happened in the real space program. They, when they first tried to rendezvous two spacecraft, they just kept doing it wrong, because burning towards the spacecraft meant that you would actually end up drifting away because you're pushing your apoaps up, so it didn't work that well. Anyway, we found the little bit of spacecraft this Kerbal had left, and he's totally out of life support, so we better get him into Kerbal 1 pretty quickly. It's nice having that nav ball for Kerbals now, because it used to be was I once had to do a rendezvous on the moon, around the moon, using nothing but the moon and the tracking marker as guidance, and that was quite difficult, but I did just about achieve it. But yeah, anyway, we got him into the cockpit. Apparently Jeb was in the inline cockpit, because he always likes trying out new tech, and it gives you a great view of space, which you may have seen, but I am buzzing past it. A lot of this video is at 4 times time accelerate, because there is quite a lot in it, and it's a lot of fairly sort of almost stuff you've seen before, but there is some cool stuff in this episode, so, you know, do stick around. But anyway, we've got to deorbit now and leave SAS on, because this is probably going to want to go nose first into the atmosphere, which isn't fantastic, because the heat shield is on the back and the parachutes are on the front. You don't want to mix those two up. But anyway, we're getting a good flame. Always nice to see the flames, especially at night. They do give you quite a nice look at your spacecraft, and I think at some point I switched to inside the cockpit just to take a look at this, because Jeb obviously is infatuated with flames. Okay, apparently I did that before and didn't see it because it was a 4 times time accelerate. Anyway, now I attempt flying this using using it as a lifting body, which does work. You can see my prograde marker raising. So yeah, you can use this as a lifting body, but I decided probably best to land it with parachutes instead of my terrible flying. Although I have landed cockpits before with nothing but canards after various dogfights, which you may have seen in my live stream, in which I had a dogfight. That was rather cool. Anyway, grab a few reports and things just to, you know, get as much science as possible and recover this. And we got a little bit of science, we got a little money, and we got a couple of world firsts for, like, rendezvous, and I forgot, I can't read the other one, but one of them's rendezvous, so that's good. And then a bunch of missions completed, and some kind of mail. Oh yeah, Mitgun has joined our space program, which is good, because he's a pilot, and we need pilots right now, since we only have 2. Anyway, Valentina is taking to the taking to the cockpit today to go into a polar orbit so I can get some EVA reports from above the poles and tundra. I have apparently science from the surface of the tundra because apparently that island, the KSC island, is tundra, which is confusing to me, but it's a weird world. Weird universe. Everything's much smaller in this universe than our own. Anyway, yeah, we're heading to orbit now. It's just our standard Bluestone rocket right now. It's still just called Bluestone 7 because that's the vehicle, and I couldn't really be bothered to rename it because then it fills up all my save files and stuff. But yeah, it's a pretty effective rocket. It's pretty small. You can still see that Mick scrap in orbit, which is quite nice. But anyway, yeah, let's just push ourselves to orbit and grab a little science because we do need to carry on with our Thunder program. The program in which we send probes to the moon. Yeah, I forgot to mention the name of the probes last time, which always, saddens me because I put a lot of thought into these names, and, well, not that much thought. Thunder just sounds cool. And they are thundering to the moon at a rather crazy velocity. Anyway, an EVA report from above the Arctic gives us some good science, and now we just got to get above the tundra. That was the Arctic again. I'm not entirely sure where the tundra is. Apparently it's not the icy bit at all, which I really should have known. It's just a frozen bit of land. Oh, apparently I did get it. Well, good job, me. And I'm going to try and deorbit just here. I want to land in the desert. Well, it looks like I'm going to try and land in what the collaborative warfare people know as Edith's Side, one of my bases in the glorious war against the perfidious penguin and terrible Twitchy with the all-right Agonarch. Good alliteration. And the terrific tape. Alright, I've named us all. And the okay, how do you what word meaning terrible at war starts with V so I can do Veluxy? But anyway, enough of that. It's time to just deorbit. Obviously pretty routine for Valentina at this point since we have only had two pilots up to this point, so she's taken on about half of the responsibilities, although maybe Jeb has done a few more just because he's first on the roster. But anyway, yeah, pretty standard descent. And this was all 4 times time accelerate as per usual, just because it's another one of these missions which you've seen before. But anyway, I want to get some science from the surface on the mountains. And my initial idea was to build a weird-looking cargo plane, as you see here, that would drop a pod. But apparently this is too many parts, and no one would get in it, because apparently that was the stupidest thing they'd ever seen. So, back to the normal plane. I'm just going to try and land on the mountains. Yeah, the problem is, there's a lot of science on the surface of the mountains, but there's not a easy way to land, because it's a mountain, and apparently my cargo plane didn't pass, regulations. Apparently it was dangerous. Apparently I'm insane, Was Werner okay, yeah, I'm probably not as good as Werner von Braun. Anyway, this flight took a while, because I was just flying over the mountains, and, it's just flying, and you've probably literally seen that before in previous episodes, because planes are a good way to get some easy, cheap science. So yeah, I'm just going to go over there, find a nice spot to land, and pull all of my parachutes. Mick Gunner's, of course, in the cockpit, because we don't want to lose one of the orange chutes on one of my crazy, missions. But anyway, yeah, as I said, long flight, just going to cut through it to here with a little bit of sped up footage of me trying to find a good location to land. And this bit looks pretty flat. I mean, flatter than our runway. I really should upgrade that, but I don't have a big plane program right now, so yeah. Anyway, here we are. I've selected this, and I've added an extra parachute to this plane, actually, so it can slow down even more effectively. And there we go, 3 chutes out the back, and we come to a pretty quick stop. That's pretty good. It'll probably land on my aircraft carrier. But anyway, here we are, just slowing ourselves down a little bit. I'm just going to observe all this science package, because this is the Goose 2, because it carries a science package, and it's my second plane, I guess. The Goose 3 was that monstrosity you saw, which apparently wasn't good enough. I don't know what that noise was. But anyway, then I have this plan to get a EVA report while flying, which involves jumping off the vehicle and grabbing an EVA report, which went rather well. So I'm going to store that and grab an EVA report from the ground, because apparently when you're holding onto the cockpit you're no longer flying. Apparently they fixed that. Because apparently that's not how it works. But anyway, yeah, so I got a little extra science from that, and then just kind of fail at getting back into this cockpit. Lots of jumping, should put a ladder on it, but if I can jump, it's fine. And then I've got to figure out how to take off from this mountain. And the mass is all messed up, so it kind of doesn't take off that well, and it doesn't have any canards. So it doesn't have great authority for taking off, but yeah, I'm just going to throttle up as much as possible, and then just go for it. And if worse comes to the worst, there's a big ramp-looking thing over there, and that's just basically just a real runway. It's got a ramp up there. It's like taking off from an aircraft carrier. What are you talking about? Second time I've mentioned an aircraft carrier. I'm very excited about aircraft carriers. I don't know why. They're awesome. Anyway, here we are, tumbling across this mountain, and then over the ridge, because this just won't pitch up. Over the ridge and up and away, and then another long flight back, which I won't bore you with. And here we are, coming into land, just behind the runway, and then I'm just going to roll onto the runway. So I got all my money back, but yeah, I'm not going to land on that crazy bumpy runway. I should really buy a new one, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, anyway, there we go. And then I rolled onto the runway, which you don't need to see. And I got a pretty decent amount of science, and now I just need a little more science to get solar panels. And here is my rover again. There's a bit of science I didn't pick up, so I thought I'd just go and get it, just speed through this. Apparently that little drop there is physical, so I sort of fell into that and then had to push myself down the slope. But yeah, I just grab as much science as I can from the slipway and the KSC, the VAB. And yeah, that pretty much gives me enough science to get solar panels, which is what I'm buying now. Well, researching and stuff. Yeah, solar panels, better probes, batteries, better communications arrays. And talking of communications arrays, today we're launching Hawkeye 1. This is the start of the Hawkeye program. Some satellites that will watch our probes like hawks, because these are my communication satellites. This is going up into a roughly geosynchronous orbit. I say roughly because I don't have patched conics or anything that will tell me if it's actually geosynchronous. I just know the rough altitude I need to be at. So anyway, relatively, just a slightly expanded bluestone rocket with an extra tank and a couple of boosters, which I dropped away a long time ago. And this is just going to go into a high orbit and be a relay, basically. It's going to communicate with it's going to stay in a geosynchronous orbit above the KSC, and it's going to relay to other probes. And I'm also going to put a second one up in a bit. I don't actually need 3, maybe thinking wouldn't it be best to have 3, but having 2 pretty much covers everything except a small blind side on one side of Kerbal, which I'm sure will never be a massive issue. I'm not actually sure of that, but hopefully. Anyway, so I only have solar panels on one side, because I only have small solar panels, and I had a pretty serious part limit of 30. I still have that, yep. So I need to have this constantly pointing at the sun. Luckily, if you point it at the sun, it will remain pointing at the sun until Kerbal orbits in moves around the sun in such a way that it totally moves out of line. So, yeah, this should probably work, at least for 4 to 6 months out of the year. Anyway, now I need to do a burn here to put myself in a correct orbit, because I couldn't do it at Apoaps because I didn't have any communication / sun power. I mean solar power, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, now it's just a matter of going around so I can actually put it in the real proper orbit. And right now I'm going a little faster than the rotation of Kerbal, because I needed to catch up with the communications bit. So yeah, I'm just going to put myself in to burn my periaps up to the right altitude. And then here I'm just grabbing... Oh yeah, I paid for this mission by taking on a small mission to grab a little science and send it back. It's not actually any science data, so it's not particularly useful to me, but it gives me the money for the rocket, for the rocket and the probe, which is all good. And then I've just got a little bit more positioning to do, which we'll see here, all sped up again. Which is just a matter of catching up with the... so, am I doing... Yeah, I'm doing a retrograde burn here, so I'm moving much faster than the rotation of Kerbal, so I can be actually over it. It's just a matter of catching up with it, really. And then angle my solar panels towards the sun again, and just wait until I'm in a pretty good position. That's pretty good. And then burn myself into a geosynchronous orbit, which goes swimmingly-ish. I mean, it's roughly in the right direction. Anyway, I'm going to ditch that stage because I don't really want it hanging around, and complete the burn with this really small aerospike engine from the stock extension mod. And yeah, so that antenna you see there is pointing at the ground station, and this one will be pointing at whatever the vessel is, the active vessel, so whatever vessel we're using. And yeah, that will hopefully help us go to the moon and stay there. Anyway, next is just upgrading my the contract center so I can take on more contracts, because I can only take on 2 right now, and there's a lot I'd like to do. Anyway, here I want to get orbit the moon, because, well, that's what I'm intending to do quite soon. And there's also quite a few cool things. There's some ferrying VIPs. I think there's something about Duna in there somewhere, or maybe that's later. But yeah, the test Mark 1 cockpit. Anyway, I grab a few missions, and then launch another one of these, the Hawkeye 2, which will again be watching all the other probes like Hawks, and we'll actually be watching the other satellite like a Hawk, because this will be over the horizon, because it won't be able to communicate with the ground station, but it will be able to communicate with the other satellite. But yeah, again, this is all just at 4 times sound clarity. Yeah, a lot of sped up footage in this. Oh yeah, it turns out my boosters hit the spaceplane hangar, but apparently it's fine, so that's good. Yeah, lots of sped up footage, because, you know, it's just basic launches and stuff. It's, you know, but obviously I don't want to cut all out, so it's just, here's nothing that happened. Anyway, just going up as high as we can and igniting our second stage. It looks like everything's good. These do have radiators on them just to make sure they don't overheat totally. These probes actually do have 3 antennas on them. The omnidirectional one for launch, and then these ones for communicating with probes and ground stations, because the omnidirectional ones don't have a big enough range. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what mod is allowing me to do all this communication stuff, that's remote tech. I just quickly paid for the mission by doing another one of those mystery go reports. That gives you satellites. It means you can't communicate. Probes need communication to perform things. You can't move them around without communication. Anyway, so I'm just going to put myself in a slightly elliptical orbit so that I can get a little more around in my orbit, a little bit ahead of Hawkeye 1, so that I have better coverage. So I'm just going to angle myself towards the sun again, because obviously this still has the part limit, so must always kind of face the sun. It must always point its solar panels at the sun to, you know, have enough power to power these dishes, because these require quite a lot of power. But yeah, that's a couple of satellites in orbit, which will help me communicate. And the first thing we're going to do with that is Thunder 3. Yes, a continuation of my Thunder program. This is the same rocket I used to launch those satellites, and the actual probe is basically a stripped down version of those satellites, which I'm going to send to the moon and get a little bit of science data. I'm not going to go too much science data, because I would rather send a person there so I can bring the data home. But I like sending probes before I send humans. I like a little bit of realism. Obviously, I'm sending men to the moon before... Well, I haven't sent anyone to the moon yet, but I'll probably be sending people to the moon before I send satellites to Mars, which is a little, you know, unrealistic. Well, you know, it's fine. Anyway, so yeah, just pretty much a similar launch trajectory. Luckily, this time, unlike with Thunder 2, I don't have to launch right to the moon, because the problem with the last one is it was, you know, it didn't have any communications or power or anything, so it had to go right to the moon because it was going to die really quickly. But this has some time. It has communications, it has solar panels in the same sort of setup, because it still has to power one of those antennas. Hopefully soon I'll get the articulating solar panels, or just more parts. I'll upgrade the VAB at some point when I have the money. But yeah, you can do a lot with 30 parts, as I've demonstrated. But yeah, separating those fairings and just burning into orbit, and then waiting a little while, and then probably just going to the moon. I'm going to point that antenna at Hawkeye 1. I'll probably be changing that up occasionally, just to make sure I you know, retain coverage around the moon. But anyway, yeah. So I'm on my trajectory to the moon. Not exactly sure where I'll be going yet, because I haven't got patched connects. But yeah, you can see that little line between the two satellites means I'm communicating, and now I'm communicating with the ground, and then Hawkeye something else. I think it's Hawkeye 1. And I try to point out Hawkeye 2, and it totally screws me. And then I get communication with Hawkeye 1, even though it's not pointing at that, so that's weird. So I just switch it back to pointing at Hawkeye 1, so I can complete my orbital insertion burn. Get a little bit of science, you know, get a world first, complete my mission, which was science data from around the moon. And then I'm going to put this into orbit, so it can act as a relay around the moon. I don't think it does have an omnidirectional antenna, so it will be able to communicate with things that are around the moon, and hopefully act as a relay. And I complete the mission for orbiting the moon, which I wasn't even intending to do this episode, but I did, so that's good. So yeah, anyway, I'm just going to burn this into a slightly higher orbit, and then leave it there so it can communicate with the Earth-bound satellites and, well, the Kerbal-bound satellites and things around the moon. Hopefully, I think the range on the antenna's big enough for that, so I can send more probes, and they just have slightly better coverage, basically, because there's still a dark side of the moon where I have no communications. But anyway, yeah, this is the end of the episode, a nice continuation of the Thunder program. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you're looking forward to future episodes where Kerbals and more probes will head to the moon and to other places. This has been Chaos Booth Tape. I will see you next time.